On May 15, 1967, following the Sacramento incident, the Panthers released their 10-point program in the second issue of the Black Panther weekly newspaper. The document was created in 1966. 5 founders of the Black Panther Party, Huey Newton and Bobby Seale, championing solutions addressing needs in the Black community like decent housing, employment, education, and freedom from oppression. Each one of these statements was put into place for all Black Panthers members to live by and actively practice every day. They would publish this 10-point program, and all succeeding 537 issues of the Black Panther newsletter would contain the 10-point program entitled What We Want Now, which emphasized the party's commitment to advancing a revolution that addressed the needs and interests of the Black community. The 10-point program was a set of guidelines to Black Panther and states the ideals and ways of operation. It was a combination of the Bill of Rights and the Declaration of Independence. The Panthers wanted to not just to be about armed action, they wanted to be a legitimate voice of Black people. And as such, the program intended to take care of a broad range of the Black community's needs. The program heavily drew their 10-point program from that Malcolm X crafted for Elijah Muhammad with the Nation of Islam, published in August of 1963. The plan heavily copied Malcolm X nationalism without the Islamic religious aspect. The 10-point program was as followed. We want freedom. We want power to determine our destiny of our Black community. We want full employment for our people. We want the end of the robbery of the capitalists of our Black community. We want decent housing, fit for shelter of human beings. We want education for our people that exposes the true nature of this decadent American society. We want education that teaches the true history and our role in present-day society. We want all men to be exempt from military service. We want an immediate end to police brutality and murder of Black people. We want freedom for all Black people held in federal, state, county, city prisons and jails. We want Black people to be brought to trial. We want all Black people, when brought to trial, to be tried in a court by a jury of their peers or people from the Black communities as defined by the Constitution of the United States. And we want land, bread, housing, education, clothing, justice, and peace. Welcome, this is One Mike. I'm your host, Country Boy. And as you can see, this is the second part of our series on the Black Panther Party. As usual, if you like this, please consider donating to our Patreon page or my Buy Me Coffee. You can find that down in the description below. Also, if you'd like to listen to more episodes like this, you can find us on onemikehistory.com. Also, give us 5 stars on Apple Podcasts. But without further ado, let's get started. Following the Sacramento incident, the Black Panthers were charged with the felony of a conspiracy to invade assembly chambers. The group would plead to a misdemeanor charges disrupting a legislative session, but the Panthers' actions had other consequences. Because of their armed presence, the Mumford Bill was swiftly approved and signed by then Governor of California, Ronald Reagan. The Mumford Act even added a new clause barring anyone but law enforcement from bringing a loaded firearm into the Capitol. Worse yet, the demonstration in Sacramento drew the attention of then FBI Chief Edgar Hoover, and he wanted to make sure that Black nationalist hate groups were further scrutinized. In 1956, the FBI formalized and consolidated its intelligence gathering and disruptive activities into its first counterintelligence program, or COINTELPRO. Originally, it was designed specifically targeting the Communist Party USA. During the early days of the civil rights movement, the FBI did monitor the activities of civil rights activists, but did little to actively or directly oppress the civil rights movement. However, by the end of 1963, as the movement gained international coverage and support, the FBI started to undertake extensive measures to hound and discredit Martin Luther King and continued these activities until his death. In the summer of 1967, the FBI drastically shifted the direction and intensity of its repression of black political organizations. In the summer of 1966, Stokely Carmichael called for black power, and the black liberation struggle entered a new phase. The organizations like the Student Nonviolent Coordinating Committee and the Revolutionary Action Movement declared a common cause in the Vietnam War in opposition to America. In the following year, the movement became more nationalistic and more confrontational. Urban rebellions raged in black areas throughout the country, and black nationalist organizations called for an armed resistance against the state. Thousands of young black rebelled and rioted, and on April 4th, 1967, Martin Luther King joined the younger generation of black leaders in denouncing the U.S. involvement in the Vietnam War. Meanwhile, Richard Nixon was running for president and had positioned himself to capture the conservatives of the Democratic Party, who were deeply troubled by this social unrest. Wanting to attract as much of the white vote as he could, he confiscated crime, rebellion, civil rights, and students all together, and the gamble worked. In November, Nixon was elected the 37th president of the United States, and from the first days of his presidency, Nixon took a personal interest in the Black Panther Party. In March 4th of 1968, J. Edgar Hoover expanded COINTELPRO against black nationalist groups and other dissenting groups. In 1969, J. Edgar Hoover described the Black Panthers as the greatest threat to the internal security of this nation. By 1969, the Panthers and other allies had become the primary targets of COINTELPRO. The goals of the program were to prevent the unification of militant black nationalist groups and to weaken their leadership, as well as discredit to reduce their support and growth. The Internal Revenue Service would even support efforts to repress ideological organizations. The IRS established an activist organization committee in July of 1969 to collect basic intelligence gathering data on members of the Black Panther Party, organizations that did business with the Black Panther Party and other radical political organizations. The FBI supplied the IRS with names of individuals and organizations, and the IRS in turn supplied detailed personal financial information and also targeted these individuals with special enforcement of tax regulations. As FBI Director William Sullivan later testified, the Bureau did not differentiate between Soviet spies and suspected communists and the black nationalist movement when deploying surveillance and neutralizing tactics. The Black Panthers would not initially recognize the depths of the actions of the FBI against them, but they had other issues to deal with. In October 8, 1967, John Fry of the Oakland Police Department sat alone in his patrol car on Willow Avenue at the corner of 7th Street. Officer Fry had developed quite a reputation. Fry was not what you would categorize as a good cop. He had been implicated in numerous incidents of racism. This particular evening, Fry had been called to a dispute at a black grocery clerk named Daniel King and a white man found without pants who claimed that King had stolen his pants. According to King, Fry called him a nigger and held his arms so that the white man could beat him. Several hours after Fry was released by King, Huey Newton and Gene McKinley drove by his parked patrol car. Fry had a list of 20 cars that the Oakland Police Department had identified as Black Panther vehicles. One of the cars listed was a Volkswagen 1968 sedan tan with the tag AZM489. Frey called for backup and pulled out behind the Volkswagen and turned his lights on to make the stop. Now at this point, there are conflicting accounts of what actually happened on the corner of 7th and Campbell in Oakland on that morning, but Officer Herbert Haynes testified that upon responding to the request for backup, states that Newton stepped out of the vehicle while Officer Fry informed Newton of his arrest. Officer Haynes stated that he heard a gunshot and was struck in the arm. As Officer Fry accompanied Newton to the patrol car during the ensuing physical altercation between Officer Fry and Newton, Officer Hearns shot Newton in the midsection, and Officer Hearns testified that he heard additional gunshots fired, although there is some discrepancy in the order of the gunshots during the altercation. A nearby bus driver, however, that witnessed the shooting, the bus driver testified that Newton produced a concealed firearm that went off, striking Officer Haynes, and that Newton using this firearm to fire 7 more shots at Officer Fry, who ultimately was pronounced dead at Merritt Hospital. It is clear at this point as during the early hours of the morning, Newton and Jean McKinley arrived at Dave Hilliard's house. Newton had a gunshot wound in his abdomen, so David and his brother June Hilliard rushed Newton to Kaiser Hospital emergency room. Newton would later be arrested later that morning in the emergency room of Kaiser Hospital in Oakland. At his murder trial, Newton testified in his own defense that Officer Fry had hurled racial epithets at him and struck him in the face. Newton further testified that after Officer Fry had brandished his firearm, that he experienced a sensation that felt like boiling hot soup spilling into his stomach. Newton testified that after the volley of shots, he didn't remember anything else until he arrived at Kaiser Hospital. Newton testified that he was conscious or semi-conscious during this interval, and in order to corroborate his testimony, the defense produced a Dr. Bernard Diamond, who stated that Newton's recollection is consistent with a gunshot wound to the abdominal cavity, which would likely produce a profound shock reflex action that could lead to a loss of consciousness. Soon, the story was all over the news that Officer Fry was dead and Huey P. Newton, Minister of Defense for the Black Panther Party, had been arrested as the prime suspect in his murder. From the start, Newton and the Black Panther Party viewed the trial as a political contest rather than a mere legal proceeding. The party put it in an issue of his newspaper, the picture of Huey Newton and a wicker throne, and the front page bold headline, "Huey must be set free." In the weeks leading up to Newton's arrest, the Bay Area's anti-war movement had experienced its own conflict with the Oakland police. As the resistance against the Vietnam War intensified, white anti-war activists began experiencing similar police repression, which deepened their alliances with the Panthers. By October, the draft resistance movement had gathered steam, and no longer were students and anti-war activists simply Americans expressing their view within established channels. Inspired by Black Power, emboldened by rebellions, they saw themselves as subjects of an empire. Much like the Vietnamese, they rejected the legitimacy of the war, the draft, and the government in general, seeking to resist by any means. Following Newton's arrest, Eldridge Cleaver's role became increasingly important, especially in the party's collaboration with white organizations in the Free Huey Newton movement. Huey Newton's campaign developed alliances with numerous student and anti-war activists. Free Huey Newton bumper stickers appeared all over the Bay Area, and this movement helped receive invaluable support of the Free Huey campaign and helped advance the anti-imperialistic political ideology that helped link the oppression of the anti-war protesters to the oppression of blacks and the Vietnamese. One of those such groups was the Peace and Freedom Party, founded by Rampart's editor Robert Sear and other members of the Community for New Politics. The Peace and Freedom Party sought to promote a strong anti-war, anti-racist politics. At the time, though, they were almost exclusively white and began approaching black organizations for support. The SNCC and other black organizations had rebuffed them, so working with the Black Panther Party offered them much-needed legitimacy to the Peace and Freedom Party's racial politics. The Panthers also keenly understood the isolation of the black radical movement and that the struggle needed non-black allies, particularly progressive white allies. Late in 1968, Huey P. Newton was convicted of manslaughter in the killing of Officer Frey and sentenced to 2 to 15 years in prison. He was acquitted of wounding the other officer, and many Panthers and their supporters were disappointed that their efforts did not save Huey. Huey Newton's lawyer, Charles Gary, promised to appeal the decision, and many police officers saw the sentence very differently and wanted Newton executed for the killing of Frey. Eldridge Cleaver would use his newfound fame as a leader of the Black Panther Party to become the candidate for the Peace and Freedom Party's nomination for President of the United States in 1968. The Black Panthers saw this presidential campaign as an opportunity to build influence and broaden their support within the left, even though they had no actual plans of winning the presidency. Eldridge Cleaver running for president represented a disaffection from both the Democratic and Republican parties. It was the idea to use the traditional election process to win an audience and organize a radical movement. As Eldridge would explain, the Panthers sought to focus attention on a revolutionary leader with a revolutionary program within a conventional political context. We want to pull people out of the Democratic Party, out of the Republican Party, and swell the ranks of the Black Panther Party and the Peace and Freedom Party. Cleaver and his running mate would ultimately only receive 36,000 votes, which was 0.05%. On April 4th, 1968, Martin Luther King would step out on his balcony on the second floor of the Lorraine Hotel in Memphis, Tennessee, and was assassinated by James Earl Ray. 2 days after the assassination of Dr. Martin Luther King, with riots raging all across the United States, 3 carloads of Black Panthers pulled to the curb of Union and 28th Street on West Oakland. Eldridge Cleaver was driving the lead car with members of the Peace and Freedom Party that had donated to the Panthers. The entourage included David Hilliard, 17-year-old Bobby Hutton, and 6 other rank-and-file members of the Black Panthers. Cleaver opened the door and walked around to the passenger side of the Ford purportedly to urinate. Moments later, several police cars pulled up and shined a light on Cleaver. Words were exchanged, then gunfire. Panthers ran for cover, and the police quickly cordoned off a 2-block area. Neighbors gathered in the streets. An hour and a half later, Cleaver had been shot in the foot and in the rear, and his lungs were burning from tear gas and a smoke bomb, and he emerged naked from a burning basement, surrendered, and was taken into custody. But Bobby Hutton, according to Cleaver, although Bobby was stripped down to his underwear and had his hands raised up into the air and proved he was unarmed, the Oakland police shot him more than 12 times, killing him. Although the Black Panther Party claimed that the police had ambushed them, several members later admitted that Cleaver had led the group on a deliberate ambush of the police officers in an attempt to provoke a shootout. At the funeral for Hutton, 2,000 people packed into a church in Berkeley, and 100 uniformed Black Panthers formed an honor guard. The Reverend E.E. Cleveland called it a down shame of the powerful for failing to improve the lot of blacks. After service, the Panthers held an outdoor rally and proclaimed that Bobby Hutton had been assassinated for his Panther politics, and the Black Panthers leadership charged that Hutton was posed to challenge racism and that the police had killed him to repress this challenge. Following this incident, Eldridge Cleaver was charged with attempted murder, and he jumped bail and fled to Cuba in late 1968. Initially, he was treated with luxury by the Cuban government, but that hospitality ended upon reports that Fidel Castro had received information from the CIA infiltrating the Black Panther Party. Cleaver then decided to head to Algeria, where he wouldn't return to the United States until 1975. Early in 1968, the Oakland-based Black Panther Party had began organizing a chapter in Los Angeles, and Eldridge Cleaver had recruited Bunchy to organize a chapter of the Black Panther Party in Los Angeles. After the Watts riots, the Black Power movement in Los Angeles had centered around the Black Congress. After the Watts riot, Black organizations had proliferated, and one of those groups that came to power was the Black Congress. But the dynamics of the Black Congress had quickly changed with the rise of the Black Panthers. The politics developed by Huey Newton, Bobby Seale, and Eldridge Cleaver had resonated with young blacks in Los Angeles, providing a new conduit for change, and the Black Panthers had developed ideas about black people suffering and a vision for advancing dignity and power amongst black people. They had also created an organization to advance this vision. Early in 1968, the Black Panthers had essentially a local organization based in Oakland with a satellite chapter beginning to organize in Los Angeles. Although the Black Panther movement would begin brewing in other cities, the Black Panthers had not yet achieved national influence. But this would change in 1968 following the murder of Dr. Martin Luther King. That one event changed how the Panthers were perceived by the black community. Seeking an effective way to advance the black community's interests, young blacks flocked to the Black Panther Party and its politics of armed self-defense. The Black Panthers did little recruiting. Instead, young activists from around the country contacted the Panthers and asked how they could join the party. And the party responded by opening new Black Panther offices. These offices were in 25 major cities like Atlanta, Chicago, and New York, Philadelphia, and Washington, D.C. And peak membership was nearly 5,000 by 1969. Young blacks were drawn to the Black Panther strategy of armed self-defense against police because it gave them a powerful means to resist and avoid repression. Facing resistance of organization by young blacks, police departments could no longer maintain brutal policing practices with complete impunity. By arming organizations and advocating revolution, Black Panthers challenged the legitimacy of the state, and by framing this practice of self-defense as a part of a global anti-imperialistic struggle, the Panthers were able to draw broad support from other black political organizations and as well as non-black organizations. These allies proved to be a crucial financial and political and legal support that enabled the Panthers to be able to mount top-notch, unprecedented legal challenges against many of the charges that they faced, and often won their cases in court. Without this allied support, the Panthers would have quickly dissolved. Instead, the Black Panthers rapidly became the most influential black movement organization in the United States in the late 60s. As the Panthers grew in influence and membership, so did pushback from the state. The Panthers sought meaningful activities for members so that they could serve the community and strengthen the party and improve their public image. So they deployed community programs, and they quickly became a cornerstone of the party's activities nationwide. The Panthers community programs began in 1969 under Bobby Seale's leadership because Eldridge Cleaver had went into exile and Huey Newton was still in prison, and it marked an important transformation for the Panthers' political ideals. The idea was inspired by Mao Zedong's advice to revolutionaries in the Little Red Book, and Newton called for the Panthers to serve the people and make survival programs a priority within its branches. The Panthers launched its first breakfast program for children at St. Augustine Episcopal Church in West Oakland. The parishioner Ruth Beckford Smith coordinated the program. When the party decided to organize a breakfast program for children at St. Augustine, Beckford Smith volunteered to coordinate the program and help organize it. The first day of the program, it only served 11 children. By the end of the week, the program was serving almost 135 children a day. When Bobby Seale went to prison in 1969, David Hilliard, chief of staff for the party, took the reins of the party's organization. Hilliard continued to give priority to the development of the free breakfast program for children, and during his tenure, the program spread like wildfire, becoming the Panthers' most important activity. The breakfast program was an important public face for the party and also matched the Panthers politically and ideologically. The Panthers claimed to have fed 20,000 children between 1968 and 1969, and they said they hoped to feed almost 100,000 between 1969 and 70. These breakfast programs enjoyed widespread support within the black community, and the free breakfast program adopted a rigorous routine. Members had to be at the site early in the morning in time to prepare the food and be ready for the children arriving before they ate and headed off to school. Transporting some of them from the home to the site and then to school was yet another vital offering and a logistical challenge. While children ate their meals, though, members taught them black liberation lessons consisting of the Black Panthers Party's messages and black history. Businesses donated food and supplies to the local Black Panther programs, mostly due to altruism and promotion of a positive community relations. But businesses that chose not to help faced the Black Panthers' wrath. At times, the Panthers' persuasion blended on harassment and sometimes strong arming. Far more common, though, was boycotts and picketing of businesses that refused to assist the programs. Equally common was the tactic of calling out or public shaming those that refused to help. Churches and other community-based organizations that refused to sponsor or allow breakfast programs on their premises faced a similar treatment. Politically, the breakfast program shed a light on the government's failure to address childhood poverty and hunger. The U.S. government only spent $600,000 on breakfast programs in the fall of 1967. Government-sponsored breakfast programs grew rapidly as the Panthers pioneered their free breakfast program. And by 1972, government-sponsored breakfast programs were feeding almost 1.8 million children out of the approximately 5 million children that qualified for such help. The success of the Panthers' free breakfast program for children led for the party to initiate free clinics and a range of other community programs. Many blacks were poorly served by the healthcare system, and some of them had never seen a doctor. Once again, despite the healthcare initiatives within the federal government, in urban areas, community residents only received limited, if any, healthcare attention. The Panthers ran free medical clinics that relied on volunteer services of local doctors, medical students, interns, residents, nurses, and community folks, as well as donated or low-rent clinic space. These public-run Panther clinics offer services to all who came, black and non-black alike. Some of the cities, like in Baltimore, the party formed coalitions with like-minded individuals and groups to run free clinics with the community. For the party, the focus was plain and urgent: to address within the limited resources a pressing healthcare concerns to poor black communities that were sorely lacking in adequate medical facilities and professionals. The clinic's services included first aid, physical examination, prenatal care, and testing for lead poisoning, high blood pressures, and sickle cell anemia. If necessary, the clinic could refer to a specialist for follow-up care, and there were at least 11 clinics, and Chicago's Free Medical Center was one of the best-run and most respected Panther health clinics, serving almost 2,000 people in an initial 2 months. The medical teams in the clinics went door-to-door assisting people with their healthcare issues, and the clinic staff included obstetricians, gynecologists, pediatricians, and general practitioners. Still, despite these successes with the free breakfast program and the free healthcare clinics, COINTELPRO still aimed to dismantle the Black Panthers Party by targeting their social and community programs. No aspect of the Black Panthers programs was a greater concern to the FBI than the free breakfast program for children, which fostered widespread support for the Panthers' revolutionary politics. Hoover explained that the FBI primary aims in counterintelligence for the Panthers were to keep the group isolated from moderate blacks and the whites in the community that supported it. The FBI denounced the Panthers' efforts as a means of indoctrination and took extensive measures to undermine the Panthers' breakfast program. For example, agents sent forged letters and incendiary propaganda to supermarkets to persuade them not to provide food, impersonated parishioners, to persuade churches providing space for their program, and regularly harassed and intimidated program participants, supporters, and party workers. In late 1968, the Los Angeles chapter of the Black Panther Party was no longer a satellite office. The Panthers had consolidated its status as the leading black nationalist organization in LA, rivaling only John Karenga's U.S. organization. The FBI would take note of the growing tensions between the Black Panther Party and the U.S. organization in Southern California, and the FBI sought to escalate the conflict by offering an anonymous letter that would be sent to Los Angeles Black Panther Party, supposedly from a member of the U.S. organization, in which it would be stated that the youth group of the U.S. organization is aware of the Black Panthers Party's contract to kill Ron Karenga, leader of the U.S., and that they, the U.S. members, in retaliation, have made plans to ambush the Black Panther Party in Los Angeles. Tensions between John Karenga's U.S. organization and the Black Panthers came to a head over the leadership of the Black Student Union at UCLA's campus and the direction of the new Black Studies program. Karenga was a formal community advisor appointed by the university's administration, supported one candidate for director of the new program. The Black Panthers wanted a role in the decision-making and opposed Karenga's candidate. The university's administration planned to announce the new director of the Black Studies program January 21st. At two large confrontational meetings of the Black Student Union on January 15th and January 17th, after which no resolution was achieved. Most of the students appeared to support the Black Panthers' position, and Lane Brown and John Hutton would be elected to an ad hoc committee to represent the Black Student Union concerns. John Hutton and Bunchy emerged as leading contenders in the upcoming election for the Black Student Union presidency. 2:40 p.m. on January 17th, as the Black Student Union adjourned, about 150 students poured out of the meeting. The conflict will turn violent. Ranking members of the U.S. organization fired guns at the Los Angeles Black Panther leaders and shot John Hodgins in the back and Bunchy in the chest, killing them both. Fleeing campus, Panthers gathered at the home of John and Erica Hodgins, and soon about 150 police officers surrounded the house and kicked in the door. The police arrested all 17 Panthers in the house. Initially, no members of the U.S. organization were arrested. The National Lawyers Guild and other allies of the Panthers quickly mobilized to raise bail and activate a legal defense. Within a few days, all the charges against the Panthers had been dropped and the Panthers had been released. Funeral services for Bunchy took place at Trinity Baptist Church in Los Angeles on Friday, January 24th. Bunchy funeral, Bobby Seale denounced Gringa as a reactionary and tool of the white power structure. The Panthers leadership believed that from the start the attack had been a government plot, and the Panthers were correct in surmising that the killings were not part of the normal course of a conflict between the party and a rival Black nationalist organization. Evidence will later emerge that shows that the state had a hand in stirring up the conflict and contributed to the killings of John Hutton and Bunchy, and yet to this day we still don't know to what extent the U.S. members were working directly with the FBI or the police, and whether the killings were planned or implemented by direction of the government. The police will later issue warrants for the arrest of the Stenner brothers, George and Larry, members of the U.S. organization, and they were present at the time of the killing. The Stenner brothers would turn themselves in to police and would receive life in prison for conspiracy to commit murder. In Chicago, Frederick Hampton would come to prominence as the chairman of the Illinois chapter of the Black Panther Party. Hampton grew up in Mayfield, Illinois, in a working-class suburb of Chicago. In September 1967, he had become the president of the Youth Council for the National Association for Colored People, where he demonstrated his natural leadership skills. Around the same time, Bobby Rush had grown up around the Student Nonviolent Coordinating Committee and began seeking partners to build a Panther chapter in Chicago. When Bobby Rush heard Fred Hampton speak at the Black Leadership Conference at the headquarters of the Chicago gang, the Black Panther Nation, he knew Hampton was his key to success. Rush recruited him to join the Panthers, and Bobby Rush and Fred Hampton, along with Bob Brown, organized what would soon become the Illinois chapter of the Black Panther Party. FBI believed that Hampton's leadership and talent for communication made him a major threat among Panther leaders, and it began to keep close tabs on the activities, and investigations shown that FBI Chief J. Edgar Hoover was determined to prevent the formation of a cohesive Black movement in the United States. Hoover believed that the Panthers, the Young Patriots, the Young Lords, and similar radical organizations forged by Hampton in Chicago were stepping stones to the rise of a revolution that could cause radical change in the United States government. The FBI opened a file on Hampton in 1967, and it tapped Hampton's mother's phone in February 1968 and placed Hampton on the Bureau's agitator index as a key militant leader. And in late 1968, the Racial Matters Squad of the FBI's field Chicago office recruited William O'Neill to work there, and he was reportedly arrested twice for interstate car theft and impersonating a federal officer. In exchange for having his felony charges dropped, he received a monthly stipend and agreed to infiltrate the Black Panther Party as a counterintelligence officer. During the 60s in Chicago, gangs were an important political force in Black neighborhoods, and none was more powerful than the Blackstone Rangers. From the start in the early 1960s, the Rangers were focused on community building in adjunct to their illegal activities, which included drug trafficking and extortion. As a result, they constituted some sort of a parallel government on the South Side, protecting members in their neighborhood from other gangs, as well as providing police and some community services. By the late 1960s, they had swallowed up most of the smaller gangs as part of the P. Stone Nation. In December 1968, having quickly built a powerful Black Panther force in Chicago, Fred Hampton entered discussions with Fred Ford, leader of the Rangers, about merging the Panthers and the Rangers. The merger proposed to boost the Panthers' membership and street presence, and Hampton suggested to Ford that they should join forces. Ford was interested in a merger, but the FBI saw the potential merger as a political threat and sought to foster conflict between the two groups. The Chicago FBI office felt that spreading false rumors that the Panther Party leadership was disparaging Ford might result in Ford taking active steps to exact some form of retribution towards the leadership of the Panthers. As discussions deteriorated, the Chicago field office of the FBI suggested to headquarters that time was right to provoke the Rangers to take violent actions by sending a forged letter to Ford. The FBI field office suggested that sending a letter to Ford rather than Hampton because Ford was more likely to respond with violence. The FBI's effort may have helped prevent a merger between the Panthers and the Rangers, but it did not precipitate widespread violence between the group because Hampton and Ford had figured out that the government was attempting to create a deadly conflict between them and didn't actually take the bait. Also in 1968, Hampton was arrested for assaulting an ice cream truck driver, and apparently Hampton had appropriated the ice cream truck, passed out more than 400 ice cream bars, and took $71 and passed them out to neighborhood children. In the weeks that followed, Hampton and the Chicago Panthers organized a free breakfast program, and within 2 weeks they fed more than 1,100 children, drew community support, and also making it hard to ignore the political dimensions of Hampton's ice cream truck driver case. During his trial in April, Hampton appeared on local television publicizing the free breakfast program and appealing for public support of the Panthers. In April 9, 1969, Hampton was convicted of robbery and assault, released on bond per a pre-sentencing hearing. Hampton planned to appeal his conviction on the grounds that the newspaper articles on the Panthers during the trial prejudiced the jury. On May 26, 1969, Fred Hampton was sentenced to 2 to 5 years in prison for robbery and assault. By the end of May, the Panthers were building a strong community-based organization, and as they grew in number and political strength, the state's efforts to repress them escalated. The Chicago FBI worked closely with local law enforcement, and that June, as the FBI had coordinated raids on the Chicago Panthers office, a special task force of 9 Chicago police officers was assigned to report directly to the Special Prosecuting Unit, which in turn worked closely with the FBI Racial Matters Squad. June 4th, the FBI raided the Chicago Black Panthers headquarters without presenting warrants. They proceeded to sack the office, arrest 8 rank-and-file members of the Panthers, and the FBI told the press that he had found several guns and ammunition. Bobby Rush said that the FBI agents left the office in police disarray, creating more than $20,000 in damage, including confiscating a safe containing more than $3,000, which was planned to buy equipment for their free health clinic. Rush described the raid as part of a concerted effort by the FBI to crush the Panthers, citing similar raids in Detroit, New York, and Connecticut. In late July 1969, the Chicago police raided the Black Panthers office for a second time. 24 police cars shut down Madison Street in front of the Black Panther office, and the officers attempted to storm the building. No Panther leadership was in the office at the time, but 3 rank-and-file members held on police for 30 minutes until they ran out of ammunition. Eventually, police shot down the steel door and made their way upstairs, beating the Panthers' rifle butts, knocking one of the members unconscious and breaking his jaw, badly injuring the others, and arrested them on charges of attempted murder. The police then used gasoline to set the upper half of Black Panther office on fire. On October 4th, the police raided the Chicago Panthers headquarters for a third time. The raid was in many respects a repeat of the July 31st raid. Officers riddled the front door with bullets and walls of the office. The police officers set the office on fire, smashed equipment, destroyed food designated for the free food programs. And after the Panthers stopped resisting, the police arrested 6 party members on charges of attempted murder, alleging that they tried to snipe at the police from the roof of their headquarters. Again, the Panthers alleged the police intentionally set the fire. Hampton, from jail, maintained that the police took money for the free breakfast program. With the repeated raids and arrests of local Panthers, many other Black organizations lined up to support the Panthers, believing that repression posed a threat to all Black people. What could be done to the Panthers could be done to any of them. On December 4th, a dozen police officers executed a search warrant for illegal weapons and raided Fred Hampton's apartment. William O'Neill provided a map with the exact layout of Fred Hampton's apartment. The assault was quick and decisive, and within 15 minutes, Fred Hampton was dead, shot twice in the head while he still laid in bed. The Peoria, Illinois Black Panther chapter leader, Mark Clark, was in Chicago attending a statewide meeting of Panther leaders, and he was also shot. 7 other Panther members in the apartment were arrested on attempted murder charges, aggravated battery, and unlawful use of weapons. The New York Times reported that one of the rooms in the walls appeared to have scars and potholes and bullet holes, and there were clusters of bullets and gouges of shotgun blasts in places where the Panthers was said to 2 men were killed and 4 others were wounded. There were no bullet marks in the area of the 2 doors the police said they had entered. On January 6, Bobby Rush informed the press that the results of the blood test from Fred Hampton's independent autopsy revealed a heavy dose of the sedative Sedanol, which is a drug to induce sleep. Rush charged that the killing of Hampton was a government conspiracy and Hampton had been drugged by an FBI infiltrator to facilitate his murder. Hampton's fiancée, Deborah Johnson, who was 8 months pregnant at the time and arrested during the raid, later recounted Hampton's murder and strange behavior on the night of the raid. She said that Hampton had never gotten up from the bed during the raid and remained silent. He only woke up slightly and lifted his head when guns were being fired, but barely moved or said anything. After the first wave of shooting, police arrested Johnson, put her out of the bedroom and into the kitchen, and she heard police say that he was barely alive, but he was going to make it. Then police started shooting again, and a police officer said, but he's good and dead now. There was an immediate outpouring of support for Hampton, and the Panthers used the attention to organize support through education, offering tours of the apartment where Fred Hampton and Clark had been murdered, and the National Black Panther Party understood and sought to portray the killing of Hampton and Clark as a political assassination and part of a national government's conspiracy to repress the Black Panther Party. In early 1969, the Connecticut Black Panther chapter opened and was led by Erica Hudgens. They offered political education classes and attempted to start a breakfast program and regularly held public speeches. They started to attract national attention. The FBI paid close attention to the New Haven Panthers and tapped their phones, infiltrating their ranks with several undercover informants. In March of 1969, Edgar Hoover fiercely remanded the New Haven field office for not producing more hard-hitting counterintelligence measures for dealing with the Panthers in New Haven, Connecticut. In early May, the New Haven police wiretaps revealed that Bobby Seale was going to be speaking at Yale University later that month to raise funds for legal fees, and the police passed on this information to the FBI. On Saturday, January 17th, New York Panther George Sams showed up at the New Haven Panther offices with Alice Rackley. Rackley was a 19-year-old who was homeless, desperate, and eager to please. He had joined the Panthers in New York looking for a place to fit in, and Sams was a bully who had been expelled from the Black Panthers for stabbing another Panther in Oakland, but was reinstated at the request of Stoughton Carmichael, whom he once served as a bodyguard. Sams showed up in New York earlier that spring as police began arresting most of the party's leadership during multiple raids. He called himself Crazy George, and he claimed that he was there to straighten out unreliable chapters. When Sam arrived in New Haven, he claimed that he had been sent by the national headquarters to weed out spies, and he immediately took control of the fledgling New Haven chapter and charged Rackley with being a spy and set up a kangaroo court to interrogate him. With the help of Warren Kimbrough and a new Panther recruit, Donnie McLucas, Sams tied Rackley to a chair and tortured him. The two beat Rackley with the club and twisted coat hangers around his neck and poured boiling hot water all over him. On the evening of the 20th, 3 days after Sams had brought Rackley to New Haven, Sams announced that he was going to drive Rackley to the bus station and let him go. With Kimbrough and McLucas in tow, Sams took Rackley to a wooded swamp in the suburbs, and Sams handed Kimbrough a .45, and Kimbrough shot Rackley in the back of the head, killing him. Sams took the gun back and handed it to McLucas, telling him to finish Rackley off, and McLucas shot Rackley in the chest. The police and the FBI had gathered extensive information on the New Haven Panthers chapter through paid informants and wiretapping. And the night of May 20th, a police informant called the head of the information division of the New Haven police and warned him that Sams and others were about to transport something important in Sam's green Buick Riviera. New Haven police chief later said that he suspected that the Panthers were kidnapping someone and that a hostage was in transit. However, they did nothing to stop Rackley's torture or murder, later claiming that they did not know he was being tortured and that they tried to follow the car that carried Rackley to his death, but that the Panthers had eluded them. The next day, the police recovered Rackley's body, and later that night, they conducted raids that arrested Edgar Hoover, Warren Kimbrough, Donnie McLucas, Francis Carter, and 4 other rank-and-file members on murder charges. The police arrested the Panther suspects in New Haven the day after Rackley was murdered, and Sams had already left town. But he had left behind the tape of the recording made during Rackley's torture, and the police had no trouble locating and confiscating the tape when they made the arrest of the New Haven Panthers. After those arrests, Sams was in and out various Panther offices nationally, with police and FBI raids following close behind. In early August of 1969, Sams was arrested in a gun incident at a New Panther chapter in Halifax, Nova Scotia. He was extradited to the United States following a trial where he turned state's evidence. Within days, the Justice Department created a special unit with the purpose of federal prosecution of Black Panther members. On August 19th, on the basis of Sam's testimony, Bobby Seale, chairman of the Black Panther Party, was arrested in Berkeley, California on capital charges of conspiracy to murder for allegedly ordering the killing of Sam Rackley. The state made a deal with Kimbrough, offering him a light sentence in exchange for turning state's evidence and pinning the murder on the higher-ups. Kimbrough and Sams were each given 4 years in prison and were eventually released. Donnie McLucas maintained the innocence of the Black Party members and was slated to face trial. Panther Field Marshal Landon Williams was also in New Haven during Rackley's torture and murder, and Sams testified that he had taken orders from Williams, and Williams in turn had taken orders from the Black Panther National Headquarters. It was clear that Sams directed the gruesome events, and in the end, the state found insufficient evidence to support Sams' claim that he was following orders from Williams. Williams pled guilty to the lesser charges of conspiracy to murder and received a suspended sentence on November 1971. Hoping to pin the murder on national Panther leaders Bobby Seale and Erica Hutchins, the state prosecuted a long, costly trial in an attempt to convict the two. But both efforts failed, and all charges against Seale and Hutchins were eventually dismissed. During the 1970s, the Black Panther Party was weakened by external attacks and legal problems and external issues, and their rapid decline as a political force. But the most devastating cause of the Black Panther Party's demise were programs ran by the Federal Bureau of Investigation aiming to break up the party. I hope you join us next week when we discuss the decline of the Black Panther Party. But today, I'm Country Boy. This has been the story of the Black Panthers. As usual, if you like this, consider donating to our Patreon page. Also, if you like more episodes like this, or you can find episode 1 at onemichistory.com. Please give us 5 stars on Apple Podcasts, and peace.